Taj, can you please tell us a little bit more about your role and your responsibilities?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So I work for First Group, and Mistral Data is a First Group company. So I've been working at First Group and Mistral Data for about 10 years now. And I started off there as a solution architect. And I did various different projects and solutions, quite interesting ones like putting infotainment on trains, tracking the trains in real time using GPS, tracking the speed, and doing various proof of concepts, like trying to get seamless Wi-Fi working and things like that. After that, I moved on into more of a product manager role, which is where I then started working on Denali, which is the single customer view product that Mistral Data have developed. And then we moved on to integrating, when DataGuard CPM was bought or purchased by First Group train companies, we integrated that into Denali, the single customer view. Then there's some other new products that have come along recently, Mistral Data products, so I'm the product manager for. One's called Carmet, which is a customer communications tool, and it's integrated with an email template editor, so you can basically design your own emails that you want to send out to customers, and they can, you can reach your customers. It's for communications by email, social media, push notifications, whatever you might want to send to your customers, and then you can monitor all the campaign stats that come back. There's another platform that we've just introduced called Message Orchestration, and that's all about reaching the customers and communicating with them when their journeys are disrupted, so cancelled or retimed or reinstated. So that whole platform is developed around communicating with the customers, and those platforms are fairly well interlinked. I mean, they rely on having the reliable customer consent, and we get that through DataGuard CPM. So the platforms are built on Denali, and Carmet will ingest data that comes from Denali. Denali is integrated with DataGuard CPM to sort of keep everything honest in terms of, and up to date in real time in terms of consent.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting, and what we hear, it's a lot about customers, it's a lot about communication with customers and getting insights. But let us take a step back. I think a lot of people in the UK will know, but like I am, not all our listeners or not all our guests are from the UK. Can you tell us something about how First Group is structured? And also, I mean, you talked about Denali and stuff and your tools, but are there other services you are giving to the group?
Yeah, so First Group's a transport provider. So primarily, most people will know that they run rail services, and they've got a number of train operating companies. They also run bus services as well, and London trams. But in terms of rail, there's 5 train operating companies now that First Group own and operate. So they're names that everyone hopefully should be familiar with if they're from the UK, like Great Western Railway, Avanti West Coast, Southwestern Railway, Lumo and Hull Trains. There's another operator, a 6th one, TransPennine, which has been transferred its ownership back to the government, but Mistral Data is still supplying services into TransPennine trains, so they're still our customer. I mean, First Group's a large operator. They've got about 24% of the market in terms of rail in the UK. So they're the biggest rail operator. So in terms of that's how they are structured. What was your other question? Sorry, was it complexity? Or?
Yeah. So when you have First Group as like the mothership, people always calls them. And then you have the train operating companies. So what is the complexity, especially for you as Mistral, when you're working with them?
Yeah, I mean, the whole complexity actually is around, the the way the rail industry is in the UK. So it used to be run on this franchise model where, you know, you bid for a route, you know, they were coming up every sort of 7 to 10 years, you bid for those, then, you know, it's awarded to somebody, to an operator, and then they run that franchise for like 7 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever the length of that franchise is. But because of that, they can be handed back at any time. So if you come to the end of the 10 years that you're running the franchise, it will then go up for bidding again. Somebody else might then win it. You have to hand it over within 3 months if that happens. So, for example, Avanti West Coast, when we won that, it used to be run as Virgin Trains. We won it. We had 3 months to mobilise, which is to take it on and start operating it as a service and put all of our systems into that new company. So the new company's Avanti West Coast, you've got a new name. It's not Virgin Trains anymore, owned by First Group. So all that happens within 3 months. So some of the complexity is you have to keep those companies separate because they're not yours forever. You know, they could be, but they're not. And as we found with TransPennine Express recently, that got transferred back to the government. So it's under government ownership now and operated by the government. So yeah, that's where you have to have data separation. You can't really share the data between those companies. And you know, we have strategy where they all follow, you know, in terms of IT strategies and things, and they all follow that. But you can't share data. You have to keep it very, very separate. You have to be able to hand back the company very quickly and cleanly. You know, there can't be any messy bits of data from other operating companies in it when you hand it back or when you take it on.
Yeah, we have seen this with TPE now, and as I can say from my experience working with you and the train companies, they are all very, very independent. So they're doing what they want, and I see it working with you how hard it also is for each TOC individually to bring them the services. So kudos to that. My next question would be: so when we first started this journey, and with journey I mean the journey with DataGuard, so what were some of the key challenges? So what problems were you facing? Was it about consent rates, opt-ins, opt-outs?
I think the first challenge really, and the journey started really because of GDPR. So when GDPR came in whenever it was May 2018, that was like really the prompt to start looking at consent management properly and avoid, you know, all these sort of hefty fines that were sort of quoted at the time. You know, and obviously they're still there. It's part of the law. If you breach, you could be fined, you know, a really huge amount of money. And even the legal challenges that you know might come along, so that you might not get fined, but there could be a legal challenge that you have to then spend time and money and, you know, trying to fight a case or whatever that might be. So we wanted to avoid that. So that was a real kind of driver to try and get a handle on consent management and do it properly. There are also things like increasing consent and trying to, you know, increase the number of opt-ins that we had for the train companies, because opted-in customers are engaged. They're more engaged. You know, you can obviously reach out to them and communicate with them. They'll spend more with you. So it's all about trying to get those opt-in numbers up, and you know that's still a driver now. That's still like key thing that the train companies are always trying to do. Other things were that we had a lot of bespoke code. We were doing consent and preference management to a fashion ourselves within the single customer view, so within Denali, but you know weren't necessarily experts in that field. Like I said, there's bespoke code that we developed to manage all of that. And then similarly, in the customer touch points where people are entering their consent, if you ever want to change anything after you've developed it, it wasn't us developing it might be website, you know, third parties, website developers or app developers or Wi-Fi on the train, the portal developers and suppliers for that. If you wanted to then, you might decide you want to add a new channel, push notifications or something and start gathering that. You'd have to go to all those suppliers. They'd have to make the change. There's cost, there's time, complexity involved in that. And they would all have, they'll develop at their own pace and they'll do it their own ways. Again, you got bespoke solutions in place. So we wanted to try and remove that, put something more centralized in. We also wanted to do things like integrate with our contact center. So we've got contact center that customers can ring up. If they had questions about their consent and preference, we wanted to empower the customer center agents to have that information available to them about the person's opt-in status and history and, to be able to opt them in and out. We also wanted to start messaging people using service messages. I mean, marketing was one thing, and we were reaching out, the train companies were reaching out to customers and communicating through marketing. But I don't think we were really explicitly capturing service permissions from customers, so we didn't really know if they were opted in for service messages or opted out. So that was another key driver. We wanted to have that transparency and actually have explicit opt-ins for things like service messages, market research, so you could reach out to customers, using proper legal basis.
Yeah, which we heard from Max, which is very important that you have the right lawful basis. So for the crowd, maybe when we talk about CPM, so CPM is our consent and preference management platform, which we integrated into Denali to gather marketing consent or to gather consent that you can message to people and also to collect preferences. So what are they interested in? So that basically we make sure that when one of the talks is communicating with their customers, that they do it in a compliant way. And we give you then the tools to get this consent and the preferences. So when you embarked on this journey, did you had some, or what were kind of preparations you had to do? Did you do some due diligence? Did you had like a game plan what you want to do? Or was it just, can you help us? Can you please tell us something about the beginning?
Well, at the beginning, we had to kind of tackle it we had to talk to a lot of people internally, a lot of different teams internally, and the way there were sort of three strands to it, really. There was the technical solution. We needed to integrate DataGuard CPM with our Denali system. We had to integrate the widget which actually collects all the permissions on our customer touchpoints. So there was, all that planning that needed to be done around that and understanding what it actually meant. How were we going to do it? Was it a big overhead, for third parties to actually do that on the websites, on the app, on Wi-Fi portals? And then it was, it was quite a big change for our Denali system as well. So it was, just trying to understand what it meant. So we had workshops with DataGuard and our sort of development team for the Denali system that we had at the time. We met sort of face to face and had discussions about how it's going to work. So work through all the challenges, questions, sort of put the architecture together. It worked collaboratively really, which was one of the reasons we picked DataGuard as well, because we've got complex sort of solutions and systems in place, and we did need that collaborative approach to try and make it work. We didn't just want to get a solution and be told, oh, this is how it works. You just need to, use it the way it is. And we actually had a lot of good, positive collaboration to get a solution that was going to work for our train companies.
Thank you. Yes, we are in constant we are in constant contact and we are communicating a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you. This is basically one answer to why did you choose DataGuard. So are there other reasons why? I guess you have looked at the market. There are other solutions. So can you tell us about other reasons? Why did you went with DataGuard?
Yeah, we looked at a couple of solutions, but I think we had requirements for what we wanted the solution to be able to do. We felt DataGuard had a robust solution. It was a specialist system. We didn't have all that expertise DataGuard seem to have that expertise. So you seem to have customers that are quite diverse as well, sort of in a range of different sectors, which are different to rail. You've got charities and energy providers and other customers, so that showed that the system sort of works for, can work in different industries. And we knew that you had like a professional services team, so you were going to help us to actually get this in, work with us, do whatever it takes to get it in, basically. As a new system, you always face challenges, no people resist change when you're trying to get new systems in IT. So, all of that, I think we just needed a good approach with working with DataGuard. We got that. And then we also knew that, we also knew that your system would, help us to return value. So I think we'd had presentations and looked at case studies with DataGuard and what you'd achieved with other customers. So we were keen to sort of, to sort of increase our opt-ins and all of that as well. The train companies were really particularly interested in that. There's also the real-time element to the product. So not only can permissions and preferences be updated in real time by customers on the customer touch points, and then they're received into DataGuard, and we can pick them up from Denali and send them downstream to where we want to use that customer data and the permissions. But also in terms of content templates. So content templates are basically the wording and all of that goes on the website, so the widget that gets integrated by the third parties on the customer touch points. That can all be updated in real time as well, which is really powerful. So changes can be made so quickly. We can test them out on the test environment, and see it working on the tester website, and then it can be done within seconds, really, in a live environment as well, and appear. And if it's if you want to roll it back, you can quickly roll it back as well. So, the power's all there. And it's all done through the, the admin console, which is the web-based UI, which is, intuitive and pretty easy to use. And all the train companies got trained on that. Whenever we integrated CPM for any of the train companies, they got the training and the familiarization, and then I'm always on hand, and I think you're always on hand as well to help them out if they need any additional help.
So again, thank you again for the audience when we're talking about admin UI, admin platform, widgets, content templates. So this is part of our platform which helps the talks when they want, hey, let's get new content, so they just get into our platform and they can change things, they can build things, and these things then get published on the website. So it's a very easy and, as you said, thankfully powerful way to collect consent and preferences. So you already talked a bit on how First Group and DataGuard work together on the planning, but let's talk about a bit on the execution. Did we go with all talks at once, or what was the process in the implementing actually?
I'll just mention a few things as well, that when we were doing the sort of due diligence, and I think when you're introducing a new product as well into your organisation, and we were trying to do this across about 6 organisations actually that were part of First Group. So we had to have a lot of discussions, as I mentioned before. We had technical discussions to actually see how we were going to technically provide the solution. With the development teams and so on, architects, all of that. Also, I had to have a lot of conversations with Group Legal and the new sort of DPO that had been appointed at Group. So, GDPR came in, so these, new positions were sort of required, and then, suddenly there's this DPO, and all the train companies had a data compliance officer as well, DCO. So there was, before we could really embark on, the actual implementation, we had to make sure that whatever we were going to provide through the system matched with what First Group's GDPR policies were, what legal bases we were going to use for communicating with the customer, what expiries should we put on that consent? What consent can we claim, or what can we claim, you know, without explicitly asking the customer to opt in? So, and even things like permission statement wording, privacy policy wording, all of that needed to be agreed with and approved by group legal and the DPO. So there were all those discussions that took place. And then also there was a lot of meetings where myself and DataGuard went to actually meet all the train companies, the commercial directors there that were going to ultimately make the decision as to whether the product would get adopted for the train company, like in terms of finance and all of that. You know, CRM managers, heads of marketing, the top DCOs as well. So all the sort of the stakeholders that were interested in the product were potentially going to be using it. You know, we went to talk to all those sets of people per train company. So there were quite a lot of meetings that went on to get the buy-in and to get their high-level requirements as well, to explain the solution, the commercial model, you know, the business requirements, the technical, high-level technical solution. They wanted to know how it's going to work, how it's going to integrate. Is it going to add a lot more cost for integrating it, or you know, how's it all going to? How's their experience of it going to be if it goes live? You know, they had a lot of questions around it. So myself and DataGuard went around doing all these presentations, answering all their questions. And then when we actually, so we did all that, and then when we actually were deciding which train company would be first, because we were going to do one and then start rolling it out to the others, there was one that we'd picked, but then we won the Avanti West Coast franchise, and we then decided to make Avanti the first TOC that was going to get CPM, which was quite challenging, really, because we did it during mobilization, which is a very busy time. It's 3 months that you've got to get that new company in, working, you know, trains running on that day, and that date can't ever move. It just cannot move. You can't go to the DFT and say, oh, can we have another week to do this, or 2 weeks? You can't. The date is set. You have to have a train service operating under Avanti on that day that's been agreed. So there's a lot of pressure. There's always a lot of pressure anyway to get systems in, and then we decided we were going to put a new system in as well at the same time. So it's a big challenge for us. It's a big challenge for DataGuard as well. But again, we worked together, and you know, we were successful in putting it in. But it was a very busy time, I could say. I mean, because we couldn't start straight away either. Like when you get told like that you've got 3 months from now, like from today, you can't even start on that first day because contracts haven't been signed. You have to wait for contracts to be signed before you can talk to certain suppliers, third parties, you know. So you can't. You might have to wait 2 weeks before you can actually start, and all that time the clock's ticking. So there was a lot of pressure, but we got it in. So they were the first train company to actually get it.
Thank you. It's interesting. So you were talking about that the talks were asking what does it cost us, what are the costs. So let us look at what does it bring them. So what we have brought here is from Avanti West Coast, and what we see the rise in the opt-ins for email marketing. And what we've seen here what we see here is the rise from June 2020 till now, that we have a 43% opt-in rate, which was at 30-something%. So we see a rise of more than 10% since we implemented the CPM system within Avanti West Coast. So basically, this is also what it brings to them, and we have to make sure that we also together that we get those numbers and that we present it to them, that it's not only it costs us money, we have to implement it and it costs us work, but here is a kind of an ROI if you want. So my next question would be, so we were talking about the complexity, the planning, the implementation. Do you have some advice here for the audience and people who will later watch the recordings if they are thinking of implementing or going in the same direction?
Yeah, I mean, I would say to try and do it in phases, which is what we did. Because when we were talking to the train companies, they all had their different sort of ambitions of what they wanted to do on day one. You know, some of them were very like, oh, I want to, you know, let's just be cautious and collect the permissions through the channels and then we can add to it. Some of them were like, oh, we want to have this sort of matrix of granular consent and we want to, you know, want to give customers like all the options and, you know, very sort of detailed kind of matrix sort of almost of what you could collect, what permissions per type of communication, you know, like newsletters through email or, you know, journey alerts through push, and it was very sort of detailed. But what we kind of advised them to do, and actually DataGuard advised us as well to do, was to keep it simple and just to collect all the requirements, but have a phased approach. You know, get something working in for all the train companies, get them all at the right level, and then as their experience of using the product grows and, you know, our experience, my experience as well, grows, we can then add to that and have phase 2, phase 3, and just, you know, start using more of the functionality available. And don't try to do too much in one go, which I think was good advice in the end, especially as we did with Avanti, because we were short of time. And I would say as well, to document all the configuration, because there was I wouldn't say there's a lot of configuration, but there's a lot of IDs that need to be agreed, you know, unique references for the customer, external references we call it, all need to be agreed, need to have naming conventions. So I set a naming convention, which we've stuck to and we've kept. You know, I've got configuration documents so I can pull up what the external refs are for every train company, we did it by train company and also the customer touch point as well. So any data that goes into DataGuard has got to have this unique reference. So, you know, you've got to have a handle on what it is, otherwise the systems don't work, the integrations don't work if you don't have it. And also, sometimes, you know, a third party might change it, and then you can troubleshoot it better if you've got all the information at hand. We also sort of tried to follow a process, and you know, we had something called a permissions engagement module document, which again is sort of like a solution spec, and it has, you know, all the screenshots of what the sort of content templates are going to look like, all the IDs for the content templates, the privacy statement wording, the IDs for that. I mean, that's in the system as well, but it's good to have it in a document, and the document's a living document. We add to it. If we change anything, it gets updated in there. And it's a useful document. I mean, we do make use of it. It's not something that's gathering dust. I'm often sort of calling up those documents. And then when we were deploying the widget code, so we were talking to lots of different third parties, you know, that would never necessarily I hadn't really spoken to before, so the website and the app developers, they had to integrate the widget code into their, you know, into their systems. So providing them with the information that they needed. Some of them we had to help more than others. Some of the development teams, I think, were a bit more. You could point them to the documentation, give them the IDs, and say, "Here you go. Can you integrate the widget, and then do a demo to us to show us what you've done. What have you got?" Some of them could do it, and others couldn't. So we then realised we've got to handhold some of the developers, give them code snippets, put all the examples in. So I mean, some of them have probably copied and pasted that code in at their end and made it work that way. So, you know, we had these challenges with working with lots of different development teams. And then training, you know, DataGuard provided the training, so we didn't do that too early on. We did it towards the end, so that, you know, talks didn't have the training and then forget what they'd looked at. We gave it to them when they could get their hands on the platform. And And then, yeah, just a really detailed deployment plan. Because I remember with Avanti, I think it was about 9 suppliers I was trying to manage to deploy that. And most of the talks are like that, the big train companies. The smaller ones, you know, there might be fewer suppliers, not much fewer, but, you know, there might be 6 or 7. But, you know, the bigger ones, they've got like 9, sometimes more suppliers to juggle and deal with.
So that's good advice. We might summarize it. It's good planning, it's step by step, and good documentation and communication, working together.
Yeah.
So, unlike Ben and Max, who did it all without paper, we used our paper just to help our minds, and now we're at the end of the paper.
Thank you.